on BBC Radio 2.
All right, sorry for our technical problems today. Professor, I'm so sorry. It was a bit spotty, that line. So this thing about the hippocampus being bigger if you learn street names seems almost incredible.
Yes, that's right. It's one of these remarkable findings. It's in a lot of textbooks. And like you said, it's something we've known for 20 years. So we thought in 2021 we go back and have a look. But the big key difference this time is we're involving these London licensed taxi drivers and scanning their brains again and trying to understand more. And we've got more detailed insights this time because the technology's got better. But we're also engaging the taxi drivers in a test we've been designing to hopefully spot early signs of dementia. And we think that's particularly interesting because the taxi drivers have this enhanced bit of the brain that seems to decline in dementia. So we're hoping they can tell us more about the sort of expert, remarkable brains and what that might tell us about our tests for dementia.
Isn't the shortcut here to just find out whether there is less dementia in black cab drivers than there is in the average person in the population?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we're looking to explore with this research. That is an obvious direction. It will require a lot of taxi drivers. So the fact that you're helping to promote this on the show and let London cabbies know that they should contact Taxi Brains to help, that's extremely helpful for us.
Oh, by all means, it's called Taxi Brains, and yeah, I guess it will involve driving around with wires sticking out of your skull, will it?
No, not at all. Not at all. So in our experiments, the MRI scanners weigh a huge amount. They can't be moved, so the taxi drivers need to come into our UCL site on Bedford Way in London. They'd have a scan there. It wouldn't take very long, and we can measure their brain whilst they solve the quiz they get to do in the test and the knowledge of working out how you go from one place to another and solve it in their head. And it's a bit like a puzzle test they have to do.
This is close to the thing we're always told of doing Sudoku to try to stave off dementia. And yeah, that all sounds great until someone shows you a photo of a brain of a dementia patient, somebody who's died of dementia, and the brain has physically changed into spongiform, and you think no amount of Sudoku is going to stop that.
Well, like you said, Alzheimer's is a disease, and it's one we can eventually halt. So charities like Alzheimer's Research UK have done an amazing amount of work, and they've supported this particular project as well, where we think one day there will be a cure. It will be another disease we'll be able to stop, and you'll halt that. But what we're trying to do here is really try and enhance and understand those early tests that spot people before there's even any sign on a scan, for example. That's really one of the great challenges at the moment, is trying to find ways to identify people before so they can be treated in the future.
Let me bring our taxi driver in just a sec, but sorry, it's so interesting, Professor. Forgive me if I ask you a couple more. The one thing this is entirely anecdotal, but one thing I've noticed and also heard is that people who have very, very rigorous, precise occupations, maybe engineers, the kind of slide rule mind, seem to be more prone to dementia, paradoxically, right? Thatcher would be an example. She worked her socks off but seemed to burn out. And then you think, actually, is it maybe that they're the ones who notice because they're using so much more of their brain that when their faculties go, they notice?
It could be. That could be a good explanation. I'm not an expert in that direction, but I think that is certainly one of the reasons that might be the case. Yeah.
But in which case, then getting your brain really tuned up won't help you. It just means you notice the symptoms earlier.
Yeah, it's so Alzheimer's disease is one of those problems where it's not. You can put in all sorts of things to try and halt it, but in some cases it's out of your hands. So you can try and have a healthy lifestyle, do all these things right, but it's just something you can't completely combat through that alone. So we do need to do all we can to try and stave off and fight dementia, but ultimately it's a disease we need to have treatments for that people are working very hard to find. Yeah.
And just the last one for you then, Hugo, if I may, which is that there's a different track on all this. I know there's so much research going on, which is that dementia is caused by something called protein tangles in the brain. And one of the papers, and it's a classic tabloid front page where you don't really believe it, but they had a headline a week ago saying they've got a tangle busting pill now and it'll sort it all out. That's a completely different approach, isn't it?
Well, that's exactly one of the lines people are taking, is to try and find pills, effectively medication that would halt and stave off the disease. And it really is an ongoing line of research. It doesn't appear, as far as I'm aware, to be there's some magical cure at the moment, but they are constantly assessing and checking what's possible.
Sean Paul Day, London taxi driver. There we go. I hope that's given you a bit of background on what you're going into here.
What I'm heading into. Yeah, I take a issue with you that the knowledge is outdated, but that's a conversation for another time.
Well, and listen, in terms of this test, it's certainly not outdated, because using your brain to learn 100,000 landmarks is a brilliant thing. And I guess apart from anything else, you know more about London than anyone else.
Well, I can only describe the knowledge as a phenomenal feat of Hellmanism. Like you say, I think they have to commit to memory about 20,000 streets. On those streets are about 50,000 landmarks. But crucially, you have to be able to navigate the most efficient route between any two of those 50,000 landmarks. And only when you are fully conversant in being able to do that, and without using a sat-nav, of course, that TfL will deem you competent enough to be able to drive a cab.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's a very difficult process which takes about 2 to 4 years to complete, depending on your level of commitment.
And how long have you been a taxi driver, Sean?
Sometimes I feel like I've been a taxi driver about 100 years, but in reality, about 20. But I think the one good thing about the knowledge is London is an incredible city with its prolificity and its rich history. And I think the process of actually studying the knowledge and its accumulative nature of what you're learning is as valuable as the day you get your license.
Well, that was my point about defending it, even if a sat-nav works quite well. You know, to know it is amazing. Here's a test for you, Sean, because a cab driver the other day was telling me about something called hot and cold corner. Do you know what that is?
Hot and cold corner. Problem with me, I'm one of those rare cabbies that has forgotten more than they've ever learned.
I'm trying. It's near the Albert Hall, but I can't. I'm trying to remember why. It's two explorers. Maybe it's Livingston on one side of the building and Shackleton on the other, or something. So one explored Africa and the other explored the Arctic. And I love that cab drivers call it hot and cold corner.
Yeah, that rings a bell. I mean, cabbie parlance is, it's pervasive in our industry. I think also that the cab trade as a collective has a long history of getting involved with good causes and charities. And this is no exception. So if we can do what we can to assist Professor Hugo and his team in finding a solution to what is a devastating disease, then that can only be considered a good thing.
Well, that's great. Hugo, if Sean Paul Day has all this information in his brain, is he better protected against dementia?
That's one of the questions. That's the whole reason for doing research, is to understand these things. It is possible, but we don't know yet. So that's why we're both on your show. We're excited to tell people this is ongoing, active research, and it needs as many London cabbies to sign up to Taxi Brains to help make that possible.
Thank you very much, indeed. Happy driving, Sean. Nice to talk to you. And that's Professor Hugo Spears. Thank you, leader of the Taxi Brains Project. Isn't that interesting? Physically changing the brain when you learn stuff. Hot and cold corner, help me out there.